We probably thought the game started at 7. I don't know what the hell we were doing. We didn't come out and compete. Shit, we didn't even play. I can't say we played to the level of competition. We didn't play for a whole half.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily podcast on fantasy basketball. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball podcast brought to you by Fantrax and Basketball Monster. And today's Locked On Fantasy Basketball podcast is also brought to you by BetDSI. Use the promo code LOCKED10, that's LOCKED10, and get a $10 free bet and 100% match on your first deposit. Today's show is also brought to you by Michael Widmer, today's Patreon sponsor. So thank you, Michael, for being a supporter of the show. And if you're looking for a way to support the show, head to patreon.com/redrock_bball, and that's the way that you can sponsor a show and you can provide ongoing support if you like what you hear. No obligation, obviously, but it is a way that you can help support the show if you're looking for a way to do that. My name is Josh Lloyd, and I am the host of this show, and you can find me on Twitter at redrock_bball. Hit me up there, follow me there for any fantasy basketball questions or general musings on life. I'll be happy to engage you to the best of my ability. We're talking about the action from Sunday, rounds out a week. We're going to be looking ahead to Monday. We're going to be looking ahead to the rest of the week as well, doing a little bit of a weekly preview. So
let's get to it.
And we will start off by doing the weekly preview, looking at the games being played in this week 8. The games are spread fairly evenly across the week, which is always good in terms of being able to stream guys in. The way I normally look at it, 8 games or less, you can generally add someone off the waiver wire and get them into your active lineup. 9 or more, it makes it tougher. And this week we've only got 2 days where we have 9 or more games. On Monday we have 7. Really, and there's a lot of sweet spot days for DFS this week as well. Monday it's 7. You're going to have active open roster spots. Stream guys in. Tuesday, 6 games. The same story. Wednesday, 10. You may have spots. You may not have spots. Thursday, 5 games. Friday, 10. So we're looking as per usual, Wednesday and Friday, the heavy days. And the weekend, really nice weekend. 7 games on Saturday and 7 games on Sunday. That rounds out the week. So there's lots of opportunities to stream players in, with only those 2 days, Wednesday and Friday, really being tough ones to look at. We've got no 5-game weeks for teams this week. We've got 15 teams playing 4 games. We've got 14 teams playing 3 games. And the Minnesota Timberwolves sit by themselves playing just the 2 games. Let's look at the teams that do play 4 games. We've got the Nets, the Hornets, Mavs, Rockets, Pacers, Clippers, Lakers, Grizzlies, Heat, Pelicans, Magic, Blazers, Kings, Raptors, and Wizards. And the 3-gamers, Hawks, Celtics, Bulls, Cavs, Nuggets, Pistons, Warriors, Bucks, Knicks, Thunder, Sixers, Suns, Spurs, and Jazz. So we look at those, and let's look at in terms of these teams, because there's differences. And if you're playing in weekly leagues, you want to look at 4 games versus 3 games. Let's start the 4-game players. But sometimes you might have more 4-game players that fit. So who's got a better option? Who's got a better week of matchups? And that's something you do have to look ahead to. And sometimes a player with a 3-game week may be better than a player who's not as good with a 4-game week, or plays a 4-game week that's tough, that includes road back-to-backs, altitude trips, games against Clippers or Jazz or Spurs or teams like that. So let's look at it that way. The Rockets have the tastiest of all schedules. They start off with Brooklyn, then they go Sacramento, New Orleans, and Minnesota, hardly a murderer's row, while the Lakers have the Kings, the Nets, the Sixers, and the Cavs, so a pretty decent week for them. If you look at the bottom of the ease rankings for the four game teams, the Wizards have it tough. They play Miami, they play Detroit, they play the Clippers. So 3 relatively tough defensive teams. They also have the Hornets thrown in there, which is not quite as tough, while the Mavericks play Denver, but they've got 2 hard ones with Detroit and Utah, and then they round out the week with Sacramento. So they're the tougher ones of the 4-game weeks. With the 3-gamers, the Philadelphia 76ers have it really nice. Toronto's tough, but the Lakers and the Nets really helping to boost overall fantasy points for any of your Sixers guys. The Spurs play the Celtics, the Suns, and the Pelicans, while the Warriors have the Pelicans, the Knicks, and the Blazers. So some pretty easy matchups for those guys, whereas the bottom of the 3-team guys, the Jazz take on the Thunder, the Mavericks, and the Grizzlies. That's a horrendous week. in terms of fantasy matchups, while the Celtics have the Spurs, the Hornets, and the Heat, and the Suns take on the Knicks, the Spurs, and the Thunder. So you can see the difference there. Look, you can look at Philadelphia with Toronto, Los Angeles, and Brooklyn, or Boston with San Antonio, Charlotte, and Miami. And there's a big difference as opposed to the opponents they're playing. And of course, Minnesota with just the 2 games on a Tuesday and Saturday, taking on the Bulls and Houston. And really, the only player out of the Timberwolves guys you're going to want to activate into your weekly lineups is going to be Karl Anthony Towns. You don't want Wigo, you don't want Rubio, you don't want Levine, you don't want Jeng. It's Towns is going to be the only guy who's going to be worthwhile with that 2-game week. So that's looking at it from a weekly schedule point of view. When we look at daily changes leagues, it's different. We obviously can look at teams that play 4 games and go that's great. I can add these guys and get 4 games out of them, but not all 4-game schedules are created equal. I know I say that every week, but there'll be some teams that play 4 games that, well, for example, the Houston Rockets, who have got that easy games to play, 2 of their 4 games come on Wednesday and Friday. So adding a Rockets player, whether that be a Patrick Beverley, who I still think should be owned regardless, whether that's Sam Decker, whether that's all the other Rockets are probably owned most likely, even a Corey Brewer type guy. You might go, look, this is a deeper league, the ease is great, but can I play them on Wednesday? Can I play them on Friday? And you're probably not going to be able to do that with the Rockets players. Where you go down to Portland, and their matchups are the Clippers, the Thunder, the Nuggets, the Warriors, and you go, okay, there's some tough matchups there, but all 4 of their games come on days where there's less than 8 games played. So you can play your Portland guys, your Ed Davis, you could play your Mo Harkless if he's still around, which he shouldn't be. You can play your Alan Crabb, Evan Turner, Myers, Leonard. These guys, if they're around, you can play them 4 times this week for 1 ad, because they do play on those low volume days. The Sixers, I talked about, much like Houston, having a great week in terms of opponent ease, but the Sixers have 1 game, and that's on Sunday, where you'll be able to use them. Their other 2 games are on Wednesday and Friday, so you might add a Sixers player, whether that's TJ McConnell, whether that's Spanish Chocolate, Sergio Rodriguez. You look to stream these guys in, and you won't be able to use them until Sunday. So it's not really a great use of ads. The teams that are the best in that situation, Portland, as I mentioned, got all 4 of their games on low volume days. The Pacers have 3. The Pelicans have 3 as well, while the Warriors, all 3 of their 3 games come on the low volume days, as do the Knicks 3 games, as do the Nuggets 3 games, and as do the Suns 3 games. So you could add a Suns player. They've got a tougher schedule, but they play 3 games on usable days, and maybe that's better than adding a Kings player who have got 2 games on usable days, even though they play 4 for the week. So it does always depend on your team. Do you have a full lineup on Wednesday? Do you have a full lineup on Friday? How many games do I actually get out of these players? It's not as simple as going, this guy plays 4, let's add him and go from there. But it is a weird week with games spread right across the week in I guess in a different fashion than what we're used to, with just those 2 days on a Wednesday and Friday. And going through and setting my lineups, I don't think there was any day this week in any of my leagues. That's not true. I think maybe in 2 leagues, and I'm in about 13 leagues maybe, there was only 2 days where I had to actually bench someone who was playing that day. Because the way my teams and schedules worked out is that I didn't have full rosters on Wednesday. I didn't have full rosters on Friday. So I can go ahead and be pretty aggressive with streaming. If we want to look at back-to-backs on those low-volume days, there's only one that starts off the week, and that is Portland. As I mentioned, they've got a pretty good schedule with 4 games on low-volume days. They start off against the Clippers and the Thunder, which is not ideal defensively, but you can make 1 ad if you do it now and get 2 games and actually be able to use those guys. The Tuesday, Wednesday back-to-backs aren't most likely as useful. The Wednesday, Thursday, most likely not as useful as well. What you're looking for here is a Tuesday, Thursday pseudo back-to-back. So we're talking about the Pelicans being able to do that, the Blazers being able to do that as another team, the Warriors, the Knicks, the Bulls, also with that Tuesday, Thursday, and the Phoenix Suns have got that game on Tuesday and Thursday. So after Monday's games are done, you can use 1 addition and get someone into your lineup on Tuesday and the same guy in on Thursday as well. Thursday, Friday back-to-backs, probably not as useful. Friday, Saturday, the same thing. And then the other one we'd really be looking forward to is a Saturday, Sunday back-to-back, but there is exactly 0 teams who have a Saturday, Sunday back-to-back. So the back-to-backs you're looking at is that Portland Monday, Tuesday, and then the pseudo Tuesday, Thursday back-to-back. The other way you could go is looking at a Thursday, Saturday situation where you've got Indiana, you've got Portland having that combination, the Knicks have that combination, the Nuggets have that combination as well, the Warriors and the Phoenix Suns. So there is a few options to maximize your output when you've got limited transactions this week. So that's how it goes in terms of setting up your week. And also, it always comes down to who you're battling. So you can look at that in the weekly planner that we've got. The daily, what's it actually called? The head-to-head daily matchup. Put in your opponent, put in their roster, your roster, which you can automatically import, of course, on Basketball Monster. See how it pans out. What categories are close, what categories have got big differences in our projections, which will obviously change if guys go down or people put up stupid one-off performances or are absolutely horrible in some games, but it gives you a good idea. And if you've got huge buffers in areas, you can say, well, when I go to add this guy, I need to get steals because we're projected to be 4 steals apart over the week. Let's get some extra steals in and let's take all these information that's at our fingertips and try and make it work for my team. So that's the way that I would be looking at that. Let's now move in and talk about the monstrous line of the night, of course. And just a quick shout out to the title of the show. Of course, it is Kristaps Porzingis. I'm very slow on my button pushing. Oh no. Let's try that again. Thank you, Stephen. You're a little bit slack there on the uptake. Kristaps Porzingis. He is the monstrous line of the night, and he is also the young gun of the night, of course, being his just second season. 26 and 12 for Porzingis, 3 triples, 2 assists, 1 steal, 7 blocks. And that would have won people that category. I know I was matching up with Trent Copeland today in our matchup, and he was pulling my pants down. I had a lot of injuries, not as an excuse, but Kristaps putting up 7 blocks today got me a tie in the blocks category. And anything that I could, his double-double actually got me a tie in the double-doubles category as well. So anything I could savor from that matchup was huge. And Porzingis having a double-double, having 7 blocks, and that steal almost got me towards almost got me towards a third tie, was really helpful. That's a game-changing 7 blocks from Porzingis. His shot had been off recently, we talked about that, but this was obviously a return to form. And even in the week, or the last 2 weeks where his shot has been off and he's shooting under 40%, he's still ranked 40th, averaging 18 and 8.5 with 2 triples and 3 blocks. Really tough to complain about anything that Kristaps Porzingis has done for you so far this season. All right, let's now talk about today's sponsor, and that is BetDSI. Do you love basketball? Of course you do. You listen to this podcast. If you want to get into the action, use your knowledge to win yourself some money, go to betdsi.com. They've been in business for over 20 years, and they're rated as a top-rated business. They're safe. It's very easy to play on BetDSI, and the options are almost endless. There's a great basketball special they're running on betdsi.com at the moment. You sign up today, and you get $20 free to try their service. That's not 20, my mistake. You get $10 free to try on their service. And you can use that $10 on any sort of bet you want on betdsi.com. They are also offering a 100% bonus on your first deposit. You put in $20, you get $20 added in, plus you get your $10 free. So you can turn $20 into $50 on BetDSI really quickly, and that's not even including what you can do with your knowledge to win that money on some bets. They have great customer service. The ease of getting your winnings back is beyond reproach. There's hundreds and hundreds of wages to choose, not just basketball, football, hockey, any sort of sport you're looking for, soccer, even non-sporting events. I know they had bets out there for the election, which is obviously passed, but lots of different things you can do at betdsi.com. They also have live in-game wagering where you can bet on football or basketball or any other major sporting event as it's actually happening. You can play virtually anything at betdsi.com. So go to betdsi.com now, betdsi.com. Go there and use the promo code, which is LOCKED10, LOCKED10. Get yourself your free wager, get yourself your 100% match deposit bonus, and start your winning today. Let's talk waiver wire line of the night, and this one is weird to me. It's an odd situation. I don't think anyone could have predicted that this was going to happen because Timmy Frazier, he'd gone back to the bench. All right, so we'd had Drew Holiday starting, Etwan Moore starting opposite him, and Fraser went back to the bench. And in those games where he was on the bench, he the last game that he played, there was one of them, mind you, one game, he played 16 minutes off the bench. He had 0 points, 4 rebounds, 1 assist. And he went, okay, this is what Gentry's going with now. He's going to run Holiday as a traditional point guard, Moore as the shooting guard, and have Fraser mop things up off the bench. Then Drew went out with the toe injury. Etwan went out with a toe injury. So Fraser came back into the starting lineup. The first 2 games were average, 8, 4, and 9, 7, 6, and 6. And then he had a big 20-point game with 11 assists. Then Drew came back. Then Etwan came back. And Gentry said, okay, Drew, you're back starting. Let's leave Bud Hield as the shooting guard. So we'll play Timmy Fraser and Etwan Moore off the bench. So I went, okay, that's fine. So we're going to give big minutes to Drew. We've got we've got Hield, who's going to be at shooting guard. We've got Etwan Moore, who's going to get his 20 minutes or so at shooting guard. We've got Langston Galloway, who's playing well. We've got Reggie Williams, who was recently signed. It's going to be hard to see them running this combined Fraser-Holiday backcourt all that often. Turns out I'm an idiot because he played 38 minutes. Timmy Fraser had a triple-double, including 5 steals and a block, ending with 14 points, 11 rebounds, 11 assists, 5 steals, and that 1 block. Really don't understand the sort of change in thought process, but with Gentry there, it was looking like Fraser was a must-drop guy. I don't really know if he is. I don't know what they're going to be doing with this situation. It's clear that Buddy Hield is not up to it. At this point, it might change, but he is not up to it. So while he is starting, he played 13 minutes today. Do they go back to Etwan Moore? Now, Moore had a 20-minute limit today. Played his 20, but he could be back in the starting role. Or do they go back to the dual point guard situation with Fraser and Holiday together? At this point, I don't know. I don't know exactly how they're going to be running things in New Orleans. But obviously an eye-opening performance from Fraser, and that's 22 assists from him in the last 2 games. You could do worse than grabbing him and seeing where it goes, but it's a very fluid situation that could change every second game. He could play 12 minutes in the next game. He could play 18 minutes and have 4 points. But prior to the last 2 games, he had 6 games in a row where he'd been under 10 points in scoring, and that included 5 games of 30 minutes plus. So his numbers had been trending down in a significant way, and this feels like it's fluky. It also feels like we're playing the Phoenix Suns, so guards can do whatever the hell they want, and that's basically been the case all season. So we've got to factor that in also, that he was in a matchup that was extraordinarily beneficial to him and favourable to him as well. But obviously a clear, awesome performance from Timmy Fraser. As I mentioned before, the young gun of the night is Kristaps Porzingis, so we won't go into that. But I do recommend that you check out Locked On Pelicans. They'll have more information about the backcourt, not woes, I guess, is the confusion. What they're going to do moving forward, how terrible Buddy Hield looks, how good Tim Fraser looked in this overtime victory. So check out Jake Madison on Locked On Pelicans, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, as this podcast is as well. Let's move straight into the dud of the night, and although this might be a little bit unfair, Victor Oladipo is the dud of the night. He had 3 rebounds. That is it. He played 9 minutes and suffered a very, very scary looking fall. He went for a block shot on Jonas Jerebko and sort of got his legs taken out, crashed straight back onto his back, was down on the court for a very long time. Very hushed silence came over the arena, and eventually he was able to sit up, then stand up, and then walk off the court very gingerly under his own power. He wasn't able to return to the game, but thankfully he suffered no concussion, and they said that he was going to miss the game with a sprained wrist. Now, we don't know exactly what's happening with his arse or with his back. They look like they'd be in a fair bit of danger, but the wrist is the issue. So Oladipo gets your dud of the night. Nothing against him, but let's talk about what he's been doing. He's been struggling over the last little bit of time. In the last 2 weeks, averaging 12 and 5 with only 3 assists. The defensive numbers have dropped a bit as well after that slight resurgence, and his field goal percentage has come back down. Also, he's shooting 23% from the free throw line in his last 6 games. Sorry, not 23. I undersold you. Sorry, Vic. 29%. It's still ridiculously low at 28% from 3 as well. He's in a huge slump. Let's wait to see what the sort of information comes out about this wrist. If he's going to miss time, I would think he would miss at least a game due to this injury, but that remains to be seen. But he would be a very, very good buy low type of guy based on this recent form. I think that he will bounce back. He is averaging 16, 4.5, and 3 on the season with a steal, and he's got significant room to increase his assists and his steal rate this year. So it hasn't been great the last 2 weeks. The start of the season wasn't great. The middle bit was fantastic. So which one's the real Victor Oladipo? It's hard to tell just at this point. One thing he has done is cut his turnovers down quite a bit. That's a function of him not having the ball as much and not passing it quite as much. But he is shooting the ball more than he did last season, which I think some people might find a little bit surprising. In Oladipo's absence, if he happens to miss any time, I don't think there's a real must-add guy. Anthony Morrow started the second half, but it was Samaje Cristen who closed out the game for Oklahoma City. Neither of those guys are appealing. Kyle Singler played a little bit. Alex Abrines played a little bit as well. You could stream Morrow in for threes. Kristen maybe for steals, but really nothing there is going to be super appealing. It's probably going to increase the offensive load that goes to Steve Adams and to Enes Kanter in the front court, and we saw that happen in today's game. So unfortunately for Victor Oladipo, he is the dud of the night. Let's move on to these games now and talk about them in a little bit of extra detail. There are 5 of them on Sunday. The first one was Philadelphia and Detroit, and this was a weird one. I think for Detroit, they got smoked to start this game. I believe it was about 18-4 to start things off, and they did start to close it in the fourth quarter, but Philadelphia ended up running away with it on the road. A huge victory for the Sixers. It was almost the night of who is this point guard getting a triple-double. We had Timmy Frazier get one, and TJ McConnell missed by 1 assist, 12, 10, and 9 for TJ. Had 3 steals as well, and he was elevated into a huge role with Jared Bayless out with the wrist, and then Sergio Rodriguez shitting his pants pre-game and being ruled out with a gastroenteritis. So McConnell got the start. That's a great performance from TJ, and he was always going to look great in this spot with no one else playing point guard. But when Sergio's back, which should be next game, then TJ goes back to that 16 to 20 minute role. It was the debut of Nerlens Noel for this season, and he came out looking good. Had 8 points in 10 minutes. Don't mind the fact that he had no rebounds in that time. Got a steal, was hitting some jumpers, which is a weird thing from Noel. Also, don't like that the flat top's gone. That needs to change, Nerlens. Sorry, not happy with the change in hairstyle. But then he sprained his ankle, and he was out for the rest of the game. So he's back from his knee injury, and now he's out again. You know my thoughts on Noel. He was getting a decent amount of run. He was clearly ahead of Richaun Holmes in the rotation, but where does he sit when Joel Embiid plays? Because Embiid was out of this one, so it goes Embiid, it goes Okafor, then it goes Noel. So where do the minutes come? How much does he play at the 4? How much does Okafor play at the 4? Interesting to see how they do it. We want to see what happens with his ankle injury, but I don't believe that his upside is all that high unless he gets traded, which we've been talking about it for a long time, but hasn't happened, clearly. We're just waiting to see what happens with this situation. But he did look spry. He did look, the scoring was really impressive from Nerlens. So there's something there. But now we don't know when we're going to see him back on the court. Bob Cove, 16-7, 2 threes, 2 steals, 1 block. If you don't own him and he's available, you should really be looking into that. He is a key part of what they do, and as is Ersan Ilyasova at the moment. 15-8 with 2 steals and 2 triples for Ersan in 34 minutes. He will be a victim when Embiid comes back, when Noel is there. He'll have to lose some of those minutes, but he has been superb, and there is no reason that you shouldn't own him in a 12-team league unless you're just really looking long-term and have no one. Your team's that good, you've got no one you want to drop. As for Šarić, he played the 20 minutes here, so he was a victim of Noel coming back as well. 4-2-2 for Šarić. No real point in dealing with him in a 12-team league. And Šarić is owned in 54% of leagues, Bob Cove in 56%. That is a weird distribution of ownership percentages. There should be 20% different between those two guys. I don't really see it happening that way. 27 minutes for Jahlil Okafor. All the big men were in foul trouble here, so he was limited there. 14-9 for Ja with a steal and 2 blocks. He's putting up okay numbers when Embiid's out. The problem is his ceiling is really capped when Embiid plays, so that limits what Okafor can do. He's fine to own, but he's not an absolute must-own in my opinion. Source Castillo played point guard, backup point guard here, and he can handle the ball. 10, 2, and 4 for Source with a 3 and a steal. Really much suited in this backup role than as opposed to when he was starting. Not a 12-team league guy, definitely more that 14-team league guy. And seriously, it's so horrible watching Gerald Henderson play. He is just horrific. He can occasionally throw a real big highlight slam, and you go, that's awesome. But watching his shot selection decisions are just mind-bogglingly stupid. He is frustrating. He played 22 minutes, and honestly, it's probably too much. He had 5 assists, so good on you. But his shot attempts are just horrific. Onto the Pistons. This was a Marcus Morris game, which happens probably 1 in 5, 1 in 6. 28 points in 37 minutes for Marcus with 4 triples, 2 rebounds, 1 assist, and a block on 10 of 16 shooting. You look at that and go, cool, this guy's awesome. He's a 12-team league guy. But then he just will go out and have 10 points with no other stats in 36 minutes. And that's sort of where he is. He's a great 14-team league guy, and he's a 12th or 13th man on a 12-team league. Andre Drummond, 14 and 14 with 6 steals. It's a huge steal night for Drummond there. And we had no KCP, who was out with a knee issue. It's not going to keep him out long. He'll be back for the next game. All words seem to be pointing that way. So Darren Hilliard got the start, and he wasn't great. His first shot was a horrific air ball, 20 minutes for 5 points, and that allowed Stan Johnson to get some playing time. Now, we haven't seen much of Stan this season, and what we've seen has been poor. But 26 minutes for Stan, had 6 points, but 2 rebounds, 4 assists, 5 steals, 1 block is where we're getting at. Now, I've mentioned it all season. This is the lowest of buy low opportunities for Stan in Dynasty Leagues. Probably not great to do it just now. I don't know if you're going to get real buy low value on a guy that just put up 4 assists, 5 steals, and a block in 26 minutes. But if he goes back to DMPs or 4 minutes a game, then you go back and look at Stan, because he looked okay in the D-League when he went back a couple of days ago. He's not going to have regular stints in the D-League. Stan Van Gundy said he will go down there on nights when the Pistons aren't playing, perhaps, but not with an extended assignment down there. But a good night to see him getting the playmaking going, which is something he can develop, and his defense as well. Wasn't a great night for Toby. He had 8, 6, and 2, and Reggie Jackson was yuck. 17 shots for Reg, just hitting 5 of them. 10, 1, and 3 with 2 steals. He's still really, really rusty, Jackson, while Ish Smith had 4, 2, and 3 in his 23 minutes. And I feel safe in saying that Ish Smith can be cut. Next minute, he's going to go out there with a Tim Frazier triple-double and make me look stupid yet again. All right, the next game we look at, the Golden State Warriors. They took on the Minnesota Timberwolves, and this was almost another loss for the Warriors. But the Timberwolves, and they gave up a ton of points without scoring any in the fourth quarter. As for the Warriors, Zaza Pachulia was out again. So Kevon Looney, who was doubtful before the game, he played and he started, had 4 and 3 in 18 minutes. Anderson Varejao, who started the last game, and I was not happy with that decision just because it's stupid and he's shit. He did not play at all, and that's probably how it should be. We had David West play 14 minutes in place of Zaza, and we had JaVale play 6 minutes. And not that Zaza's a huge piece of what they do, especially fantasy-wise, but those other guys stepped up and took that role. Everyone else was back. Iggy came back, played 29 minutes, went 6, 4, and 5 with a 1-1. While the big guns, it was a Klay Thompson night where he was on 30 points on 21 shots, 4 triples, 6 rebounds, and 2 assists, while Steph had 22, 4, and 9. It wasn't Kevin Durant's night, unfortunately. 6 of 21 for Durant. Still managed to get 22 points because he went to the line 9 times and hit 9 of those, and he took 21 shots, of course. 8 rebounds and 5 assists, not his best night, but with Steph not hitting his threes at a huge volume, it was Draymond Green who stepped up. He hit 5 triples, Draymond, in 8 attempts. 18, 5, and 4, 2 steals and a block with a magnificent performance from Green. On the Wolves, Karl-Anthony Towns, 25 and 18 with 2 assists. He does play very well against the Warriors, one of few centers who can actually put up numbers against them. While Zachary LaVine's breakout year continued, 25, 3, and 4 with 5 triples. Of course, he played 42 minutes because Tom Thibodeau... I like Thibodeau. I like his ability to coach, but he shits me to tears. He does shit that is just not fun. Yeah, maybe not fun. The players are going to hate him. They are going to hate him at some point, and there's already whispers coming out that the players are just dreading practices. They're dreading the way that he treats them or yells at them. He needs to calm his sizable tits. He just needs to relax. He's never going to do it. I don't know what's going to happen first. He's going to relax, or he's going to have an anal prolapse from screaming too much. One of those two things is going to happen, and I'm guessing it's option 2. They're not improving. They're the same record as the Philadelphia 76ers. There is still a long way to go, but there is no improvement with this team, and that's not ideal. Wigo had 25 points, did it efficiently, 14 shots. He was 8 of 14 from the field. 5 rebounds, 2 assists, and really, he's had moderate increases in his rebounds and his assist numbers this year. Moderate, really small, but he has improved his 3-pointers significantly. The downside is his steal rate is half. That needs to come back up. We wanted Thibodeau to turn him into a good defender. Hasn't happened, and the steal rate is well down for Wigo. So that's really hurting his current value, despite the big increases in his threes, the moderate increases in his rebounds and assists. But they're never going to be huge. He just needs to start doing stuff defensively. The Ricky Rubio, what are you doing to him situation continues. 32 minutes for Rube, 8, 5, and 6 with a steal. He's still getting some assists, but not to the level that we know he can, and he's just not as involved as what he needs to be. So it is unfortunate, but this is becoming close to the new reality until Thibodeau realises. But that's the thing. Tibbs is so staunch in what he does that I can't see him going, all right, let's let Rubio run it. Let's run pick and rolls. Let's have him direct things rather than give it to people like Wiggins and Levine who can't dribble without looking down at the ball. That's stagnating what this team does. Gorgie Jeng, it's pretty good from Jeng. 11 and 6 doesn't look great, but 2 steals and 2 blocks is one of the reasons why you drafted him. So some nice numbers there from him. And as usual, the bench not doing anything. Also awesome to see Tyus Jones get in for 25 seconds. Cool. The next game we take a look at is Boston and Oklahoma City. A real close encounter, this one. Jay Crowder took some dumb fouls in this one and ended up fouling out, but was awesome in the time that he played. 18 points in 27 minutes, 3 triples, 3 assists, 1 steal and a block on 7 of 9 shooting, but just some real dumb shit that he was doing. Al Horford's assist campaign keeps on going. 19, 4, and 6 for Horford. 3 triples and a block, while Avery Bradley had 18, 4, and 2 with 3 steals as well. And his defense was fantastic, Bradley, in this game, despite the fact that Boston choked away a lead late. Marcus Smart, his vision was fantastic in this game, playing as the point guard, had 36 minutes, 11, 6, and 9, a steal and a 3. The problem is that the Celtics have been trying to convert him from being an on-ball point guard, a wing, a guard, a small forward, because he can't play point guard with Isaiah Thomas around. But the time that he plays with the ball in his hand, he looks better. He was making great cross-court passes. His vision looked fantastic. His decision-making was awesome. We know about how good his defense is, and his ability to switch 1 through 4 is amazing. But when he's not playing with the ball in his hands, when his big deficiency is shooting, it's a bit of an issue for his development or for this team. So it's good to see him show it. I still think that he's a 12-team league guy under the right circumstances. But what this game showed me is that he's not playing his best role, and that could limit him for the foreseeable future. Jaylen Brown is also looking good. He is shooting so much better than what he did in college. He was just a 29% three-point shooter in college. He is at over 30 this year, significantly over 30. His field goal percentage is well up as well. And over the last 2 weeks, he's hitting 50% of his threes. I was unsure of that draft pick. I would have taken Bender there. I would have had Jamal Murray over Jaylen Brown also. But he's been a lot better than I anticipated. Still don't really know where he fits in the NBA with this team, but 10 and 2 here, a 3 and a steal. Good shooting again from him, and continues to come up bigger at certain times. So really like what I'm seeing from Jaylen Brown. The power forward spot next to Horford was Amir Johnson's turn today. 29 minutes for Johnson, 6 and 8 with a steal and 2 blocks. So nice numbers there, but of course it's not reliable. While Kelly Olynyk had 8 and 8 in his 22 minutes, and Terry Rozier only the 3 of 12 in 29 minutes for 6 and 5. Onto the Thunder, Russ Westbrook didn't get the triple-double. 37, 12, and 6 with 2 steals and 2 threes, but he was the main reason this team got over the line. He was carrying them down the stretch. He also obliterated your free throw percentage, going 7 of 12 from the line, but some nice field goal percentage, some big numbers there as well. Now with Oladipo out, Enes Kanter played 25 minutes, 14 and 6 with a bonus 2 blocks. Well, Steve Adams also took on some extra responsibility, 16 and 8 with a steal and a block there. Andre Robertson, you have to be looking at him in 12-team leagues. Another steal, another 2 blocks, and he's averaging over 1 a game for the season. He's averaging a 111 over the last 2 weeks. He's shooting the ball better, notwithstanding the 2 of 7 night that he had here. But you're not drafting him for points, or you're not adding him for points. You might get 8 points out of him, but it's the 5 boards, it's the 1.2 steals, it's the 1.7 blocks that are coming over the last 2 weeks, that where his value really is. And his minutes are sky high, and it's clearly not going to change. None of these other guys are pushing him for minutes. So Robertson really fits on a team where you're looking at where you can punt points, or you've got an excess of points. He can bolster those defensive stats. Samaj Kristen, as I mentioned, closed the game. He had 2 steals in 21 minutes. His value is going to nosedive whenever campaign comes back. Not that it's really very high at the moment. While Anthony Morrow had 4 points in 28 minutes, and he's one of those guys that if the shot's not going, and it is most times, then he provides nothing. He did have 2 steals, but please don't rely upon 2 steals from Anthony Morrow. While Domantas Sabonis had 2 blocks in a little bit of a bonus, and he is clearly just a deep league player at this point. New Orleans at Phoenix. Anthony Davis was back from his rest, but he was not good. 4 of 17 from the field for Davis. Still went 14, 12, and 4. Had a steal, had 2 blocks, but his shot was way off. While Drew Holiday back from missing those games for that toe injury. 40 minutes for Drew. 23, 3 and 3 with 2 steals and 2 triples on a non-efficient night as well. Holiday and Davis combined for 35 shots, and they hit 11 of them, and that's never going to be easy. They still got the victory in overtime, but it should have been a little bit easier in that sense. Alexei Ajinça made another start, 7 and 5 with 2 steals for Ajinça in 12 minutes, while his backup Omer Ashik played 4 minutes, and that's because my boy Sheikh Diallo is very good. 9 minutes for Sheikh, 4 and 4 in those 9 minutes. Immediate impact when he comes onto the court, and it's my checklist. Who's ahead of him? Are they shit? Well, he's got upside. And that's pretty much where we stand with Diallo. And it's one big game in that game without Davis out. And what's Gentry deciding now? Is he going to be a regular part of the rotation? Is Asik going to be limited? What's Ajinça doing? Could Diallo be starting by middle of January? All right, that's not outlandish. It's probably a little bit batshit, but it's not stupid crazy, is it? I don't think so. If you're holding on to Terrence Jones in a 12-team league, please don't. 6 and 6 in 25 minutes for him. And recently signed Reggie Williams. If you have any recollection of Reggie Williams before, he used to play for the Bobcats when they were the Bobcats, Charlotte. And he'd go out there and he'd score in big bunches. And he did that here. 20 minutes for 17 points, including 4 triples. He's in that sort of Troy Daniels mold of just, this dude is just a scorer and a 3-point guy. Really nice performance. I didn't really expect to see 20 minutes out of Reggie Williams with Drew and with Etuan Moore back. I'm not sure he's going to stick into that role, especially considering Langston Galloway had been playing well, and then Williams got more minutes than him moving forward. So it's a real weird spot here for the Pelicans, especially with Tyreek returning. They're going to have all these guards, and that could mean bye-bye for Buddy Hield in the rotation. 13 minutes for Bud, 9 points with 2 triples. He's just not up to it at this point, I'm sorry. He's just not good enough yet, and might not ever be. Etuan Moore played 22 minutes. He had 9 points with 2 triples in that playing time. There's no 12-team value in Etuan. Onto the Suns. Eric Bledsoe continues to be great. 32, 3 and 8 with 2 triples and 3 triples and 2 steals for Bledsoe. Super efficient, absolutely flying at the moment. The Earl Watson, let's play our oldest players as much as possible situation took full effect. 42 minutes for PJ Tucker, 9 and 10 with 3 triples, 1 steal and 2 blocks. Hopefully we don't have to live through PJ Tucker being a starter for too much longer, with TJ Warren hopefully returning soon. It is just super frustrating. Tucker, while he is starting, he's more a 14-team league guy. And we had which center is it today sort of spot again. Tyson Chandler played 36, went 14 and 21, and he does have value, but the game before, Alex Len was the one who got the big minutes and put up the big numbers. And Len today had 4 fouls in 15 minutes for 6 and 4 with a block. Of course I like Len more. Of course I like his upside. Of course I want them to use Len more. But you cannot rely upon Earl Watson doing that. And for anyone who hasn't heard me say it before, the reason Earl Watson got this job is because Tyson Chandler and PJ Tucker said to Ryan McDonough, we like him. And McDonough went, okay, new contract. That was the interview process. Well, we don't need anyone else. Tyson likes him. Cool. So he's going to rely upon these guys. I'm glad that when he goes to these stupid strategies that it doesn't work out for him. For Watson, that is. He is not a very good coach. But when Chandler's putting up these numbers, it is hard to sit him, of course. And his rebounding, his field goal percentage can be useful in fantasy. So don't completely write him off in 12-team leagues. You can use him, definitely. And he probably should be owned. I like Len's upside a lot more. But the trend is saying that Chandler's going to get more minutes than him on most nights. I don't like it, but that's the way it is. And it doesn't matter whether I like it or not. Marquise Chris 4 fouls in 17 minutes, and that's not even a surprise these days. 5 and 5 in those 17 minutes. So I went to have a look. Who's leading the league in foul rate? Of all the players playing more than 15 minutes per game, Marquise Chris is second in the NBA in fouls per 100 possessions. The leader is Mo Spates from the Clippers, and Chris comes in second. He can't get out of his own way. He can't get out of his opposition's way. He is not putting up any value, and I'm still not convinced he is going to be a good NBA player. Devin Booker had 16 points. He played 38 minutes, 5 boards, 5 assists, 1 steal, 2 triples. Nice numbers, but as is a theme with Booker, poor efficiency. 40% from the field, 25% from the 3, 67% from the line. Wasn't a great night for him, but he does have the counting stats going most of the time. Still could work with some improvement there, but efficiency is a real bummer. Leandro Barbosa played 33 minutes because, of course, he did. 18 and 3 for Barbosa. That's 4 straight with double-digit scoring for Leandro. Probably just a deeper league sort of guy, but it is an interesting trend the way that's heading at the moment for Barbosa in Phoenix. The last game of the night was the New York Knicks and Los Angeles Lakers. Talked about Kristaps already. Derrick Rose was back, and he was ridiculously efficient. 12 of 16 Rose for 25 points, but a very Derrick Rose line with no threes, 2 assists, and 0 steals. That is basically what he does these days. That moved Brandon Jennings back to the bench, but it didn't stop his production. 19, 3, and 4 with 3 triples. You can absolutely own Jennings in 12-team leagues as a back-end guy because he's getting you shit tons of assists for that waiver wire type production. Hits threes, have the occasional scoring outburst, and him and Rose playing together actually works at times. I don't think Courtney Lee's that great. He did have 16 points here, and he's shooting the ball really, really well. I think he's top 5 in the NBA in 3-point percentage, but he doesn't do enough to be a 12-team league fantasy guy. The Knicks, they've ruined one of my DFS lineups today. On Draft Stars, one of the Australian sites, I was flying. I still actually cashed in all my double ups despite getting 3 points from Darren Hilliard and despite having Cock in them. And he was a extraordinarily late scratch with absolutely no word that there was any injury whatsoever with O'Quinn. Apparently he sprained his ankle in the game against Sacramento. Still played on it, but then didn't play today. So a really late scratch there. So that cost me, I reckon, a pretty high tournament finish, but still managed to cash. That's how exciting my lineup was. Billy Hernan Gomez replaced Cock and had just 6 points, but 12 boards, 1 steal, and 2 blocks in one of his best performances of his short NBA career. Bill was a monster on the boards, and this is sort of what he is. He's like an Enes Kanter, the Spanish Enes Kanter. He can score with high efficiency, he can grab boards, but his defense leaves a lot to be desired. Now, a steal and 2 blocks is obviously fantastic, but it's not really what his game is based on. O'Quinn is the more appealing player. Joakim Noah is the least appealing of that threesome. He had 4, 3, and 4 in 20 minutes, but interesting to see when O'Quinn comes back exactly how they run that rotation. Melo 13, 8, and 7. Not a good Melo night. On to the Lakers, they saw the return of D'Angelo Russell and Uncle P, Nick Young. They both moved straight back into the starting lineup, but they had minutes restrictions. Russell played just 17 minutes, hit only 1 shot out of his 8, which was a 3. Had 5 assists and 2 steals, and the Lakers generally looked better with him out there. So, I wouldn't be too bothered by this subpar performance. He'll work his way back in the next week, and hopefully he can approach 30 minutes, although with Luke Walton, I'm not all that confident that he gets right back over 30, which is a spot where he should be. As for Uncle P, he had 15 points on 11 shots in his return, 4 rebounds, but pretty stock standard, not doing much in the other categories. But as a scorer and a 3-point guy, you can get some value out of Young. It was a night for where did this come from. So Luol Deng had 22 points. Of course, he did 5 triples for Deng on 8 of 13 shooting. Do not buy into this. Do not get excited. This is literally his only good performance from the season. He has been a train wreck. This was one that was completely arsey. So I wouldn't be looking too deeply into and considering adding Deng in most spots. Speaking of arsey, Lou Williams, 24 points. Again, 6 rebounds, 5 assists, 2 steals, 2 triples. His crusade to get in the All-Star game continues. I don't understand what's going on with this guy, but he is almost unstoppable at this point, and one of the best waiver wire pickups of the year. Julius Randle had a 17 and 10 double-double, or Jordy Clarkson, who'd been trash really when Russell was out, Moved back to the bench, 14, 4 and 4 in 32 minutes, shot the ball well, a much better performance, a welcome performance from him, while Brandon Ingram moved back to 26 minutes on the bench with Russell and Young back, and he goes back into being just that stash type of player. In Roto only, you cannot stash him in daily changes leagues because you will stash him so much that you won't end up making the playoffs when his value will likely come in. That does it for all of Sunday's action. I'm going to take a quick break, and then we're going to be back to preview the 7 games that are coming up on Monday. Alright, guys, let's talk perfect DFS, starting with FanDuel. Russ Westbrook didn't achieve his 5x value, but still in the perfect lineup, 57.4. And of course, out of the blue, Timmy Frazier at 54.7. Shooting guard Klay Thompson, 40.2, while Lou Williams continued his strong stretch of play, 37.7. The small forwards, well, the PJ Tucker, Luol Deng stack worked brilliantly. If you had that, then I don't know what NBA you've been watching, really. 31.5 for Tucker, 34 for Deng. Power forward Enes Kanter, 28.2. Porzingis at 58.4. And the center was Karl Anthony Towns at 48.6 for a total of 390.7. On DraftKings, TJ McConnell went for 44. Clay went for 43.5. Deng, 37.25. Towns at 52. Then we had Drummond, 45. Bledsoe, 51.25. Porzingis, 62.5. And Timmy Frazier at 60.25 for a total of 395.75 points. Let's talk about these games now that are coming up on Monday. The first one of those games is Charlotte and Indiana. The Indiana Pacers are favoured by 2, and the total is 212 points. Kemba Walker, who had to leave last game with a knee contusion, he's probable, so he should be ready to go. But Monte Ellis, who had a groin problem for the Pacers and wasn't able to finish the game, he is listed as questionable. Well, his play has been questionable recently anyway. I've seen a few articles coming out suggesting that the Pacers move him to the bench and start Rod Stuckey. So interesting to see what they end up doing with that spot. But apparently Nate McMillan won't be making any lineup changes. He doesn't think that's the way for the team to get better. I'm not sure what he would know about that anyway, but that's not what they're going to be doing. But if Ellis is out, they're going to be forced to make some sort of change. Let's talk point guards. Jeffy Teague is at 6,700, has been really depressed in terms of his numbers recently, but a salary coming down by $400 plus a really positive matchup makes him an interesting target without being the best one out there. He's only averaging 29 over the last 3, 28 over the last 5, coinciding with Paul George's return, which is to be expected. But with a really positive matchup here, I don't think that Teague is a horrible guy to look at. As for Kemba at 76, he's also dropped by $4,000. He hasn't really been turning in the big numbers lately. He's got a very good history against Indiana, though. I still don't think I'd be putting Kemba into many lineups. At shooting guard, Rod Stuckey, he's at 3,800. He's averaging 27 minutes across the last 3 games, and that's yielding 18 points. Now, if Monte is out, that could see some Stuckey, and at 3,800, he would be a really good tournament guy to have a look at. I don't think that you could argue that he would be a terrible option. I'll talk about the other guy who gets a bump in that situation as well. Nick Batum on Charlotte at 6,900 hasn't really been producing quite to the level over the last 3. The Paul George matchup is not ideal, but I would imagine that he can escape George at some times. So there's some interest in Batum, but it's not all that high. As for Alice, even if he plays, I don't want anything to do with that. At small forward, Kid Gilchrist at 4,700. You can leave that alone. I've got no interest even in a tournament. Or CJ Miles, he's the other one that benefits if Monte's out. He's at 4,200. He's had some decent games recently, but he also has struggled in a few of them. So really, you'd only be looking at him if Monte happens to be out, and even then, depending on what they go in the starting lineup, he would be a bit of a punt considering he's over 4,000. Paulie George at 8,500. He is putting up some numbers now. 43 over the last 3, dropped to 51 in the last game. Michael Kidd-Gilchrist is a fairly decent defender. So that's a little bit of a concern with George, but if you're spending up at small forward, he's a fairly solid option to go with. Marco Bellinelli, another small forward on the list, he's at 3,900. He does have the ability to go for 26 or 27, so that puts him in GPP consideration. Power forwards, Marv Williams is at 4,300. He is struggling to a significant degree, averaging under 17 points in the last 5. In fact, his highest score over his last 5 games is only 20. His shot is way off. He can't hit anything. He's not getting any blocks, but he's getting opportunity. He's getting 26 a night, but with Frank Kaminsky yapping at his heels, he's far from a lock to have value. Now, it's a positive matchup for Marv here, so at 4,300, he can beat that number. He can. I don't have confidence in it, but he can beat it. Power forwards, Frank the Tank at 45. I would spend the 200 less on Marv because the role feels a little bit more secure for Marv, whereas Thad Young at 5,000, well, he dropped almost 45 in the last game, completely pulled it out of his arse considering he'd been averaging 22 over the previous 5. I don't want to spend 5,000 on Thad based on that one game where it was seemingly defying logic. At centre, we've got Cody Zeller, who dropped almost 30 in 23 minutes in the last game. I don't expect him to go that high, but he can approach 25 points, and at 4,700, I like it. Miles Turner, on the other hand, at $6,000, his numbers are less when Paul George plays, so that makes him okay, but far from outstanding. He did have 33 in the last game, but averaging just 25 in his last 5 games is not reason for a huge amount of optimism, but he could get to 30 points here. It's not a ridiculous thing to think of. There are going to be other centres out there that are better options, but he is in play. Al Jefferson and Roy Hibbert are not. Let's talk about the next game. We're looking at the Milwaukee Bucks and the Toronto Raptors. The Raptors are favoured by 8.5, and the total is 213 points here. DeMar DeRozan is listed as probable with some personal issues, so he should be ready to play. That's the only real injury concern that we need to look at in this game. Corey Joseph as a point guard, 3,800. The minutes have been okay for Joseph recently, but he's not producing. Really tough to consider using him. I don't know why I went with him first as the first point guard when you've got Kyle Lowry, who's at 8,900. Now, his salary's jumped by $300, but his production has been tremendous, averaging 45 over the last 3. The problem here is the Bucks have had real success at stopping point guards, and Lowry himself has struggled against Milwaukee in the past, especially now you add Dellavedova in there, who's quite a good defender. Not sure that spending almost 9,000 on Kyle Lowry is going to be the most productive. As for Daly at 4,100 or Malcolm Brogdon at 3,700, I'd probably prefer Brogdon at 3,700. Not a high upside guy because Lowry is quite a good defensive player as well, but I don't think you want really any of Daly, Lowry or Brogdon, especially in your cash lineups. I can totally understand in tournaments, especially a guy like Brogdon at 3,700 who could have 25, or Lowry who could go for 55. But in cash, they're really hard to rely upon. I like DeMar at 8,500. We're assuming he plays. I think he does. There's some value in him. He's not great, but much like we saw Russell Westbrook on FanDuel today put up himself into the perfect lineup by getting less than 5x, DeRozan could be that guy just to solidify. You've got some cash around. You don't love Lowry. You don't love Kemba. Let's put some cash on a guy who could give us 40 and almost give us enough value back. And that's, I think, where DeMar sits in this game. Yanni at 9,800 has been a little bit under, so I suppose, where he needs to be recently, but he had that one game where he was limited by foul trouble, so that does drop his recent averages. It's made his salary drop by $500, so it's a big drop down. Toronto has had fairly good success with defending wings. I still think that Yanni at 9,800 is in play for all sorts for tournaments and for cash games. I'm not really scared of using him. At small forward, I like DeMario Carroll at 4,200, and I don't like DeMario Carroll as a player or even as the starting wing for this team. But at 4,200, if they give him 33 minutes, I've got a fair degree of confidence he's going to get 22 plus points. So I'm all for using him at that $4,200 salary. Tone Snell, I'm the opposite with him, so we'll forget about that. Mick Beasley at 3,500, he was carving himself into a nice role until Jason Kidded and moved Beasley from a 20-plus minute role into a 5-minute role to use barely used Miza Teletovic for 25 minutes. So if you can work out what Kidd's going to do, good luck to you. Both Beasley and Teletovic could be tournament upside guys, but you obviously can't rely upon them for cash with Jason Kidd pulling the strings. At power forward, Jabari Parker, a sub 10-point performance in the last game is horrific. At 6,200 though, he'd been getting close to 30 on most nights. The matchup shit. I'm not interested in using Jabari here. Pat, 4,400 for Patrick Patterson. He's always, to me, just feels $400 overpriced. Now, it's a good matchup against the Bucks front court, who don't defend opposition bigs all that well. He's just not a high priority guy to me, nor is Pascal Siakam, quite obviously. At center, Jonas Valanciunas is at 5,200. There's a little bit of risk associated with him, but bigs have been able to feast on this Bucks front court. And I don't think that Valanciunas is going to be any different. I don't think that the play of John Henson's going to make Dwayne... Well, actually, if Dwayne Casey was a normal coach, I wouldn't think the play of John Henson's is going to make Casey go, we need to get JV out of there. I think that he should be the guy that's in there making Jason Kidd go, shit, how do we stop Jonas? I think this could be a really big one from Valanciunas here. Johnny Henson at 4,700. His production has been okay-ish. I don't love it anymore. At 4,000 it would be great, but at 47 it's just not. Greggy Munro at 5,000, same for him. We know he's got 30-point upside, but what sort of minutes is he going to get? He's way too risky with the upside not being that high for me with Munro. And Bebe Nogueira, another guy at 3,800. He's got big upside. He's had in his last 5 games a 32-point performance in 19 minutes, so that's obviously awesome at 3,800. And by no means should you be taking him out of GPP consideration. There is no way you want to use him in cash though, because he could get 14 minutes, he could get 24. He could have 5 points, you could have 30 points. There's so much variability in what Bebe can do based on how Dwayne Casey decides to use him. The next game we take a look at, we're going to go to Washington, traveling to Miami. The Wizards are favored by 1, and the total is 205 points. We've got a couple of Miami guys who are questionable here. Lukey Babbitt and James Johnson are both questionable after missing the last few games. Babbitt with his right hip flexor and James Johnson with a right rotator cuff strain. So those guys could both be back. If they're both out, then we're looking for more minutes from Joshy McRoberts and Derek Williams as well, and they become sort of okay GPP type of players. Let's talk point guards. Tyler Johnson at 5,400. He only had 23 points in the last game on FanDuel, but still saw 34 minutes, even with Joshie Richardson back. Still no Justice, still no Waiters, so there's still going to be minutes available for guys like Johnson in the backcourt. The matchup is a little bit negative against Johnny Wall, but I think if you're spending mid-priced amounts here, getting 25 out of Johnson is not a hard thing to do. As for Dragic at 7,200, I think he's an okay value as well. I think that 35 points in this matchup is not a tough thing for Dragic to do. It's a little bit harder to get that extra amount of points, and I would rather save up the money and use it in another spot, but Dragic is okay. Johnny Wall, on the other hand, at 9,600, the Heat have got a really good record of limiting point guards. John Wall has struggled against Miami in the past. He is flying. He's averaging 49 over the last 5, but at 9,600, he'd bloody want to give you 49 points, and that's why the matchup turns me off using John Wall a little bit here. At shooting guard, Joshie Richardson in his return had 22 points in 26 minutes. He is priced at 4,600, so it's not a cheap salary. Not loving it, to be honest. I'd like to see him get 32 minutes and put up some decent numbers. And if he was at 4,000, I'd be all over it. But at 4,600, I'm just a little bit weary as to how he gets used. As for Braddles Beal, 6,800. Production's not up to it. Defense is not an ideal matchup for him. I think that we can fade Beal. Wayne Ellington, the Duke, at 4,500. He went down to 25 minutes in the last game with Richardson back, and that's most likely going to stay. So you can forget about him, and you can forget about Scooter Magruder in most spots. He played 25 in the last game and had 5 points. Of course, Marcus Thornton, the embodiment of frustration. Minimum salary for Thornton, and that's for a good reason. You leave him alone, please. Otto Porter at 5,700. Production has dipped significantly down to 24 over the last 5 and an alarming 17 points over the last 3. The matchup's actually okay. The Heat and wing and small forwards have been, they've allowed some numbers, but I'm not sure with Porter's, not only his struggles, it's been the fact that he's just not being involved. He's not getting the shot attempts. And that's a little bit of a concern. At 5,700, he's not a guy to completely swear off, but his track record hasn't been great. James Johnson at 4,900. If he plays, I would consider it, but I probably wouldn't, just considering we don't exactly know how Spoelstra will use him, and Lukey Babbitt, we won't be using him regardless of he's active or not. As I mentioned before, Derek Williams, who had 20 in the last game, and Joshy McRoberts, who had 17, they come into play at both sub 4,000 salaries if Johnson and Babbitt happen to be out. For the centres, Marcin Gortat at 6,100, not really approaching that sort of value. He has got a good record against Whiteside in the Heat, but I don't feel comfortable using him. 8,700 for Hassan. I don't love it on FanDuel. There are better options out there, but he did bounce back and have a 39-pointer, but that's not cutting it at 8,700. You need to go higher than that. Probably a fade of both these centres, but if I'm picking one of them, it's going to be Whiteside in this matchup. We go to the next matchup, and that is the Brooklyn Nets, and they take on the Houston Rockets. The Rockets are favored by 14, and the total is 226.5. So it's a huge total, but it's a huge spread. The big news for Brooklyn is Jeremy Lin is probable to play. Now, lots of excitement across the fantasy landscape, but one of the Nets reporters, Anthony Puccio, I believe it was, said he was tempering his expectations, saying he expects Lin to be active, but he doesn't expect Lin to play on Monday, most likely Wednesday, thinking that their previous history of what they've done, Karis LeVert, Randy Foye, when coming back from injuries, they will say they're ready to go, they're active, and then they won't play them. So unless we hear Jeremy Lin starting, I wouldn't be looking at using Jeremy Lin in this situation. But he does come back, and it will help their point guard situation, which has been horrible with Isaiah Whitehead, Yogi Ferrell at times, Spencer Dinwiddie now. And he could come in and help straight away in a matchup against one of his former teams. But I would be stunned if he came in and played in more than 26 minutes straight off the bat. I don't think that's what he's missed 40 days of action. That's a long time for a guy that at the time when it happened, he's jumping up and down on the bench, he's going to be fine the next day. 40 days later, still no Jezza Lin. At point guard, 5,100 for Pat Beverly, has been crushing it really recently. That is a decent salary though for a guy that's not a historically large producer of points. The 29 over the last 5 is good. The matchup's very positive for Pat Bev, so I feel okay with using it, but I'm happier seeing Pat Bev with a 4,000 salary rather than a 5,000 one. As for Lin, I touched on that already. I just don't think you can have $6,300 worth of expectation for his first game in 40 days. If Lin is out, Isaiah Whitehead will get the bulk of the minutes, but that doesn't mean that you want to touch him necessarily in DFS. At shooting guard, Jim Harden at 11,400. He had 53 in the last game. There is the concern that this game will be a blowout, and that might limit what Harden can do, but Harden is playing big minutes basically regardless of the situation. It's a great matchup for him, so he could easily triple-double in even 31 or 32 minutes here. So I think that Harden is fine if you're spending up at that shooting guard position. Eric Gordon has been crushing it in terms of real-life play, but it doesn't automatically translate to DFS, averaging just 25.7 in the last 3 games. The matchup's really positive for him as well, so he's definitely worth a look in cash as well, but hard to say that he's a guy that I'll have in all of my lineups. Shooting guard, Shawnee Kilpatrick at 5,400. There's no way I want to use Kilpatrick with the possibility of Lin playing. He had 5 points in the last game, Kilpatrick, so that's not awesome. I think that's also an anomaly, but when Lin comes back, some of his touches and usage, obviously, and even some of his minutes might be affected. Joey Harris will lose some playing time as well, and Randy Foye probably will as well. At small forward, Trev Ariza, 5,500. Hasn't really been getting to that level over the last couple, but the matchup is superb, so I'm all for using Trev Ariza here. I think this is a real opportunity for him to get even 30 plus points here. Or Rondé Hollis-Jefferson at 3,900. He only played 19 minutes in the last game. He put up 21 points, and that's sort of what he can do. And he did that by getting some rebounds, by getting some steals and blocks, and that's where his value comes in. Really just a punt option, and far from an appealing one at this point, though. Sami Decker at 3,700. Love Decker. Don't like him for DFS, though. Bojan Bogdanovic actually been surprisingly consistent, averaging 25 over the last 3, 24 over the last 5. And at 4,600, I think he's okay for cash. At the moment, his upside is not high. He's only got 28 points as a high over the last 5 games, but he's been way more consistent than we've seen from Bogdanovic in the past. So my usual thought with Bogdanovic was, let's look at him in tournaments. Tough in cash. I will probably fade him though here, despite this recent consistency, because again, if Lin is playing, then I think some of the offensive reliance on Bogdanovic goes away, and then some of his consistency fades out with that as well. We're not using Corey Brewer. At power forward, Ryan Anderson at 4,500. He is the tournament guy. He has really carved up Brooklyn in the past, one of his former teams, but he is averaging under 19 points in the last 3 games. But this is an opportunity for him to go for 30 plus, and at 4,500, I like his tournament upside, hate him in cash. Whereas Trevor Booker, who had a real stinker in the last game at 5,800, I feel okay with using Booker in cash as well, despite the recent poor performance. I'm okay with him. I think he can get 27, 28 basically every night that he goes out there. Nene missed the last game, so Montrezl Harrell got some extra run. I imagine with Nene likely back for this one, we won't see as much Harrell, so we can forget about him. And Anthony Bennett, the same story, who's been looking okay, which is the biggest compliment you can pay Anthony Bennett. At centre, Clint Capella's at 5,700. He had 29 points in 27 minutes in the last game. The matchup is superb. I think you should be looking at 30 plus for Clint, so I do really like him here. Brookie Lopez at 7,200. I think you look at around 30 for Brook as well, but you got to pay an extra $1,500 as opposed to what you pay for Capella. So it doesn't really register Brook as being an awesome go-to guy, especially with the way that they are sort of keeping a limit on his minutes on most nights. Justin Hamilton missed the last game with a migraine. That's not impacting us either way. Same with Nene, who was out for rest. The next game up on the slate, we're looking at the Denver Nuggets, and they take on the Dallas Mavericks. A couple of injuries to look at here, or actually one injury, and that is Wilson Chandler, who missed the last game with hip soreness. So we want to check out that. Now, with him out in the last game, Kenneth Faried was able to get a 19 and 10 double-double off the bench. I don't think we should put high hopes in Kenneth Faried doing that in 24 minutes again, but he will get some extra run if Wilson happens to miss out. At point guard, Darren Williams is at 6,200. I like what Williams is doing. I don't like it at 6,200 in DFS. Despite this really good matchup, he does have an ability, but I feel that 6,200 is almost ceiling type value for Darren, so not happening with me. Manny Mudiay at 4,800. Well, he's averaging a robust 7 points over the last 3 games. He can be pissed right off. 4,700 for Jameer Nelson. With Mudiay back, his ceiling is capped a little bit, so that makes 4,700 a little bit rich for me. While 3,700 on Jamal Murray, always a tournament guy because he can have those nights where he gets hot. It just doesn't happen often enough, but in a tournament, sure. Shooting guard, Farton Will Barton, 5,500. We thought he'd be in for a big performance with Chandler out in the last game. That didn't happen. He had just 23 points. He is a wildly inconsistent player. He's a guy that can go up and down, but I do like him here. I don't hate the matchup. Dallas has some issues with point guards, and they really restrict point guards and not quite as harsh against shooting guards. And Barton with no Gaz Harris again, and especially if Wilson Chandler's out, I'll be looking for Farton Will Barton to turn it around again. Wes Matthews at 5,700. I do like that. The matchup is very positive. He's averaging 31 across the last 5. I feel pretty good about Wes getting 26 plus in this one. So despite the salary rising by $300, I feel a lot more comfortable with Wes now than what I did earlier in the season. Seth Curry at 4,300. He played 26 minutes in the last game, but the production level is nowhere near high enough to make that a viable move. As for Wilson Chandler at 6,300, coming back from a hip problem against a Dallas team that restricts wings to a degree, I don't love that really one bit. The Rooster Danilo Gallinari at 58 finally paid back some value with 32 points in that last game and has got a really big history against Dallas, playing well against them. I think he's a tournament guy with definite 40-point upside here, the Rooster, but in cash, I'm not really that keen. What about the pencil Harrison Barnes, 6,400? He's scoring, he's just not doing anything else. So while the matchup is good, I don't think that 6,400 on the pencil is worth it. I would rather take the Rooster. It's a good matchup, the Rooster versus the pencil. I would take the Rooster at 5,800 and save myself that $600. The starting small forward for Dallas is Dorian Finney-Smith, and he is actually averaging 20 across the last 3, and he is at 3,700. So if you're looking to get some other high-priced guys in, maybe Finney-Smith is worth looking at. I think you can probably do better than him, though. At power forward, of course, it's Nick Jokic at 5,600. He's averaging 34 over the last 5. His lowest score in the last 5 is 30. There's always a risk because of Mike Malone, but the way that Jokic is playing, it feels just rock solid to go, okay, Nick, you're getting me 28. Let's just go from there, and your upside is 40, even if you play 25 minutes. And if you play 30, then look out. It's on. As for his opposition, it's Dwight Powell. And I say opposition, I know Jokic will play center, but he's listed as a power forward on FanDuel. Dwighty Powell at 4,500. He gets jerked around by Rick Carlisle, not in the good way either. He's only playing 24 minutes over the last three, giving you just 23 points, and at 4,500, that's okay. I just don't know how high Dwight Powell's ceiling is. Not a terrible cash play, with a fairly decent floor of 21 points over the last five as a minimum score. So I like it there. I just don't think his upside is really that high for tournaments. Darrell Arthur at 35, the starter now, played 20 plus minutes in his two starts. Darrell can get hot. Darrell can rack up defensive stats in bunches. He can hit threes. He can score. At minimum salary, I think that Darrell is absolutely worth a look in a tournament and could surprise quite a few people by having a 20 or even a 25 point game and higher. Where are we? Juancho Hernangomez had 22 points in the last game. With Wilson out, maybe if Wilson is out, you might look at him, and that's where Ken Fareed comes in as well. But if Chandler's playing, I want nothing to do with Fareed. At centre, Salah Mejri at 3,700. Will he play 27 minutes? Will he play 11 minutes? That's the big question. We don't know. At 3,700, he does have upside to go for 30. If he gets 27 minutes, he can absolutely do that. And the Yusuf Nurkic, Nick Jokic combination, it's not like playing Boogie Cousins. It's not quite, look, as good as Jokic is, it's not the same in terms of for an opposition center. But Jokic could also run rings around him as well. So there is a bit of risk with Mejri, but I don't hate it in a tournament to use him and go, okay, well, you're a starter. You could play 27 minutes and you could come out and block 4 to 5 shots and grab 8 rebounds and get a couple of steals and bring me home with 30 plus points. He can do that. As for Nurkic, he is playing much better next to Darrell Arthur. Had 25 in the last game, and at 4,500, is he worth it? I just think that the limit on his minutes because of Jokic makes him really tough to use, especially in a tournament. I don't think his upside's there, where his ability to have the arse fall out of his game completely and give you nothing is also pretty high. So it makes him a guy where I just don't feel the confidence in using Yusuf Nurkic. Next up, we talk about the Los Angeles Lakers and the Sacramento Kings. There's no spread released for this one just yet. Obviously, Russell and Nick Young return today. No word on if they're going to have another minutes restriction. I would guess that they do. Or if they sit out for rest, I don't think that will be the case. Let's talk point guards. Jordy Clarkson's at 4,900. Finally returned value, having 25 points today. The matchup is not horrible against Sacramento. I don't love the fact that it's a back-to-back, but he is in play, especially if they say there's a pretty decent limit on Russell's minutes. I got myself tongue-tied. Darren Collison is at 5,500, really not returning that sort of a value lately. The matchup is really good though, so I would definitely look at Collison in a tournament and think he can go for 30 plus. This Lakers backcourt does allow opposition point guards to put up pretty significant numbers, and we've seen that happen through the majority of this season. Like Derrick Rose shot 75% from the field today. That should be enough to tell you that point guards against the Lakers, they can put up some numbers. As for D'Angelo Russell, at 6,100, it's just nowhere near appealing enough when he's going to be limited in minutes, so forget about him. Forget Ty Lawson and Garrett Temple. Despite getting minutes in the mid to high 20s, at minimum salary, he doesn't convert them into fantasy points. Shooting guard, 6,300 for Lou Williams. I don't. When is this going to stop? I don't know. He had 38 today. He's averaging 42 across the last 5. 6,300. The salary is the same as it was today. The Kings do somehow restrict what shooting guards can do. Lou plays a fair bit of point guard as well. Majority of point guard actually at the moment, and they're not as great at defending point guards. So Lou Williams at 6,300, it's really tough to fade him considering he's just beating value basically every time he goes out there. So 6,300 for Lou, fine. Ben McLemore, who's the starter now for the last 3 games, he's playing decent minutes. It's not coming in terms of production, but he is a minimum salary guy who could very easily have 25 points. Obviously not a cash game play, but in a tournament, if it gets going with a positive matchup, he is worth having a look at. Uncle P had 20 today in his return at 4,000. I'm not interested there until we get the minutes back, and even then, at that slightly inflated salary, he's not all that appealing. Rudy Gay at small forward, $7,000. Really good history against the Lakers. The matchup's good. The defense is good. I think that he is rock solid in cash for 35-ish type points. Luol Deng had 34 today, which is awesome, except that he's not that good. So I don't think we should look too closely at that. Brandon Ingram is off the board now as well, that he's back in that bench role. Matty Barnes, not happening for him either at 3,700. I like Omri Caspi at 3,700. The minutes are trending up. He had 24 points in 27 minutes in the last game. He's averaging 20 over the last 3 in 22 minutes, and at 3,700 with the potential for him to push towards 30 minutes and potentially push towards 30 points. I really, really like it as a tournament play. It could blow up completely, but the trend is getting Caspi in and playing him more minutes and using him more, and I like using that trend. 6,400 for Julius Randle. Well, 34 points today was great, but it's still hard for me to see a way that he gets to $6,400 worth of value on most nights. It just feels like it's not a high value, not a winning play to use Randle a lot of the time. Larry Nance at 42. Tough to use him. Same with Willie Cauley-Stein and Anthony Tolliver. At center, it's boogie time. He's at $11,000. Love that against the Lakers. We should be looking at 50 plus for DeMarcus Cousins, so he is absolutely fine. And when you save your money, that's why you save it, to use a guy like Cousins. Tim Mozgov, Costa Koufos, the other centers on the board, 36 and 3,500 respectively, and there is a reason that they're priced that low. I think you can forget about both of those guys. The last game of the night is the Portland Trail Blazers and the Los Angeles Clippers. The Clippers are favored by 9.5, and the total is 217.5. Now, Blake Griffin missed the last game with knee soreness. He is questionable for this one. We don't know if he will play. Austin Rivers has been ruled out already with concussion, whereas for the Blazers, Al-Farouq Aminu is questionable with that lower back contusion, which caused him to miss their last game. At point guard, Chrissy Paul's at 9,500. He had a whopping 62 against New Orleans in the last game. And if Blake is out again, I love him even more. I still like him here with a Lillard-McCollum defensive combination backcourt. Chris Paul is in a pretty decent spot here, so it's an added bonus if Blake is out. I don't like that his salary's gone up $500, but if you're spending up on a point guard, Paul I think is one of the ways to go. If you want to go cheap, his teammate on the other end, Fatface Ray Felton, 3,500, he is back from his personal issues. The last time Griffin missed that he was available, Felton started. So we don't know what the Clippers are going to do, but if they decide to start Felton, then he could get 25 plus. And at minimum salary, he should be able to give you that value back. So I really think that he is in play. Plus, he'll absorb, if Griffin misses, he'll absorb some of Griffin's minutes, but he's also going to have to absorb a whole chunk of Austin Rivers' minutes, like 24 of Austin Rivers' minutes. And some of them will go to Crawford, some will go to Redick, and some will go to Felton. So I think you're looking at a low 20s for Felton anyway, which could push to 26, 27 if Blake happens to be out. So I do like him here, and he's probably a contrarian guy. 9,600 for Dame Lillard. He had 48 in the last game. Really good. You know the story, though. And the Chris Paul matchup is horrendous. So he is a very hard fade for me. Shooting guards. Redick at 4,100. I don't love it. I think I'll pass there, Wells. I do prefer Jamal Crawford. Same price, averaging 25 over the last 3. He'll take on some of that extra run that Rivers will give out, and especially if Blake is out, he'll take some extra shots as well, Jamal. So I do like using him at that $4,100 price tag. As for CJ McCollum, $7,500 from McCollum. He had 48 points in the last game, but he has historically struggled against the Clippers. So to me, it's a fade there as well. Alan Crabb, don't even know why I mentioned him. Small forwards. Moe Harkless, he was back as at 4,900 and he put up 9 points, which is a clearly disappointing return. I think, though, you can look at Harkless and feel a relative degree of confidence. The Clippers' defense is a concern, and that might cause me to fade him. Anyone else, I would be all aboard using Mo. Evan Turner's out of my consideration, as is Luke Marmute, although Marmute never entered it. At power forward, Blake Griffin at 9,000. We don't know if he's going to play, but if he is, I love it because I love the matchup. Power forwards against Portland. It sounds like some sort of charity event, but it basically is. You're a power forward, you play Portland, you're putting up stats. So that could be Blake Griffin's life. If he plays, we need to watch that one. If not, we look at Mo Spates, who dropped a casual 36 in the last game with Griffin out. He's at 3,900, and he would be a great tournament option if Griffin happens to be out. Get hot against these crap like Myers, Leonard, and Ed Davis, who do allow big numbers to be put up. As for Aminu, I don't want to use him. We don't know how many minutes he's going to get just yet. Eddie Davis had a big double-double in the last game, but his form has been sporadic, and Myers Leonard's form would be sporadic if he had one good game mixed in there, which he doesn't really. At centre, DeAndre Jordan, 6,900. He has had a history of being very good against this team. Hasn't really shown it much this year. In the playoffs, he was a real handful for them, though. I think he's a decent play at centre, as Mason Plumlee is struggling a little bit. I don't love the matchup for him. He is probably somewhat of a fade, in my opinion. All right, let's look now at the picks of the day. We'll start with FanDuel, of course. At point guard, Ray Felton at 3,500, Tyler Johnson at 54, and Chrissy Paul at 95. For shooting guards, Jamal Crawford is at 41, Farton Will Barton is at 5,500, and Jimmy Harden at 11,004. Small forwards, Damari Carroll 42, Trev Ariza 55, Paulie George 85. The power forwards, Omri Caspi 37, Nick Jokic 56. And the centres. I didn't put Griffin in there because he's questionable. I don't like to put questionable guys in on the picks of the day, but otherwise Griffin would be the power forward for sure. At centre, Cody Zeller 47, Clinty Capella 57, and Boogie at 11,000. On DraftKings, Rod Stuckey not minimum 3,500. Jeffy Teague 62 is a better matchup for him on DraftKings with the scoring system and all that. And Chrissy Paul at 89. Shooting guard, CJ Miles, 39, DeMar DeRozan, 77, and Jim Harden, 11,400. Miles is more a situation if Monte happens to miss, and he's a tournament guy. Small forward, Omri Caspi, 31, Ariza, 54, and Paulie George, 8,300. Power forwards, Damari Carroll, 42, Rudy Gay, 69, and Boogie, 10,9. And centers, Cody Zeller, 43, Capella, 53, and Whiteside, 8,400. Let's look for the guys in Australia. Moneyball, Jeremy Lin is at 3,500. Now, there is obviously risk there, but when Jeremy Lin comes in at minimum salary, you definitely have to look at it, because if they name him as the starter, then it's all aboard Jeremy Lin. Goran Dragic at 65 and Chrissy Paul at 88. Shooting guards, Farton Will Barton 48, Wes Matthews 51, and Harden at 10,900. Small forwards, Omri Caspi 35, minimum salary, Rudy Gay 65, and Yanni at 10,000. Power forwards, Dwight Powell 39, Nick Jokic 52, and Blakey Griffin at 82, as I mentioned earlier. With that, I don't know why I ended up putting him in the Moneyball one, but the same story applies. Jonas Valanciunas for the centers 47, Clint Capella 55, and Whiteside 83. On Draft Stars, Ray Felton minimum 5,000, Jeffy Teague 11.8, and Chrissy Paul 17.2. Shooting guards, Roddy Stuckey 5,350, Wes Matthews 93, and Jim Harden 23.6. The small forwards, Caspi 61, Ariza 10,750, and DeRozan 15,550. Power forwards, Darrell Arthur 5,000, Nick Jokic 9,750, DeMarcus Cousins 19.9, and the centre Salah Mejri 5,000, Clint Capella 10.9, and Hassan Whiteside 14,800. We're done. If you want to support the show, go to patreon.com/redrock_bball, or you can subscribe, or you can do both. You can subscribe on iTunes or on YouTube. Leave us a review. That helps the show immensely. Thank you to everybody who has done that. Tell your friends, even if they're not into fantasy. I'm sure they can get something out of the podcast just as being an NBA fan. I believe it's the only podcast that goes 7 days a week. So if your friends are NBA fans and they want something that's going to be there every morning for them when they wake up, Monday through Sunday, tell them about this podcast. I appreciate all the recommendations that you guys give. Follow me on Twitter at redrock_bball. We are done, guys. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya. Reggie Jackson.